Ever wonder why your agency's bottom line isn't as strong as it should be? Well, it's not just you. This is actually an industry-wide struggle for most agencies, freelancers, consultants, and service providers. In this video, we're gonna break down the 3 major profit roadblocks, profit killers. And if you stick around till the end, I'm gonna show you exactly how to identify and pinpoint what these are and how to fix them for good. Now, having run my own business since 2014, I know what it feels like to feel like you're putting in all this hard work and to not have that hard work be reflected in your profits. And what I want to say is it really comes down to 3 things. And the 3 things, the 3 most common things at least, are not the most sexy and or glamorous or whiz-bang solutions, which is why they're often overlooked. So we're not talking about SOPs, we're not talking about automation, but if you're a service-based business, an agency, a consultant, freelancer, some sort of professional service provider, and you are not as profitable as you would like to be, there are 3, again, often overlooked things that we're going to be diving into today that you can start fixing today after this video. Now, before we dive in, I just want to start by explaining who I am in case you don't know. My name is Greg Hickman. I'm the founder of Alt Agency, and we've helped over 700 marketing and creative agencies, freelancers, online service providers to systematize and productize their service delivery and monetize their expertise so they make money more than one way, and that one way typically being selling their time. And that's all so that they can have a business that is profitable and lean and runs like a well-oiled machine. Now, here's the deal. If you want to be able to invest back into growth, hire the help to get you out of the weeds, invest in systems, or just really take home more pay for yourself as the founder, we need to stop the profits from leaking out the backside of the business. That being said, let's dive into profit killer number 1. Profit killer number 1 is scope creep and scope seep. They are different. So scope creep is what many of you are familiar with, which is where you just didn't have clear enough deliverables. And when the client comes and says, hey, can you also do insert all of these other things? You end up saying yes, because there were no clear deliverables in the first place. And so because there were no clear deliverables, they feel okay and or even inquisitive to see if you can help them with more stuff. And you graciously say yes, because you don't want to lose the client. Now, scope seep, on the other hand, is when you proactively suggest work outside of the deliverables because there weren't clear deliverables. And most people do that because, again, they're afraid that there's nothing that the client is going to ask them to do. So they invite the opportunity for the client to come and say, yeah, why not? Let's do that too. And so you are voluntarily letting the scope expand beyond what the project should have been. So whether it's scope creep or scope seep, the byproduct of that is that there are no real clear deliverables between you and the client as to what they are actually getting and what they are not going to get. So some symptoms of this inside of your business might be when they constantly ask for revisions to some of the things that you're working on. So if you're a creative agency and they're like, hey, can I see another version of that or another version of this? Or, hey, I like those 3 logo designs, but can you possibly give me 5 more? Or I didn't like that ad creative, can you do that? Or the copy. So a real quick identifier is if they're constantly asking for revisions or extra versions or variations that you weren't originally intending to offer or really feel like they need, then that is an area where you can hone in and create clear deliverables. The reason that this leads to profitability drain is that you probably weren't allocating for more than a couple revisions, if at all. And now your team has to spend time, which you're potentially paying them for, or if it's your time, you're spending your time, which is money, on this client that you weren't expecting. And so that's eating into your margins. And it's also eating into the bandwidth for you and the team to be taking on other projects. So if the scope is not clear and the deliverables down to the revisions to the things like what's included and what's not, you're likely going to end up paying your team or in your own time for any sort of outside the scope effort that you hadn't intended for in the beginning. So the obvious fix is to go back and look at where you had been losing profit from these sorts of requests and now start to incorporate limits and or boundaries on what actually is included, what is out of bounds, what is fair play, what is foul play, and have a way to clearly communicate that up front in the sales process. So much of scope creep and scope seep is really just about proper expectation setting. And so you might have been setting expectations that you thought were clear, but were maybe too broad or too general as to what they're going to get. Like, help you with your marketing is not specific if all you were actually planning on doing is helping them with their emails and their social media. Now all of a sudden you find yourself running ads and creating landing pages and funnels. If you're saying, hey, we help you grow with marketing, what type of marketing? How frequently? What deliverables or assets are we a part of for this project? So profit killer number one is scope creep and scope seep. And the solution is to get crystal clear on your deliverables of what's included, what's not, what's allowed, what's not. Profit killer number two is not having projects move through the timeline efficiently and or not sticking to a timeline. Now, some symptoms, some ways you might spot this is if you have some clients where you're like, hey, yeah, like normally we get this done in 30 to 60 days, but we have these other clients sometimes that it can take, 5 months. Well, what is the difference between those clients and why are some efficient getting through in the timely manner and others are not? So spending too much time on projects, too many extra meetings, too many meetings, too long of meetings. The number of times I've worked with clients where they meet with their client every week for 60 minutes, and there really isn't even an agenda, one for 60 minutes or a need to meet every single week, usually opens up the door for that client to do what we talked about in the first problem, which is invite new opportunities because they're on the call, they have you there. And because that call was on the calendar, they feel like they need to make use of that time because they feel like that's part of what they're paying for. They're like, well, we don't really have anything left to talk about for the last 30 minutes. Well, can you do this also? They're going to lean into that. And the more that you accept, the more that you're going to have to do. So you might want to think about, are we having too many extra meetings? Are our meetings 60 minutes when they could be 30 minutes? If you find yourself getting a lot of emails and there's back and forth with clients that is inefficient, that usually leads to projects not moving through and sticking to a timeline. Again, the reason this eats into profits is most service providers don't account for the incremental cost they are incurring for the back and forth, for the extra meetings that are now potentially leading to scope creep, or just the time that they're spending on calls that could be spent on a sales call, could be spent in delivery and serving another client that has paid you, etc. So not moving projects through and sticking to a timeline, too many meetings, too long of meetings, too much back and forth are likely going to be signs that this is happening. Also, some clients get the result in what feels like is very reasonable, which is a month, but then others take 4 or 6. Like if there's variance in why some clients get it done faster and some clients are longer, there's likely inefficiency on your side and boundaries, again, of how are we going to keep our clients moving through on time? So look at the number of meetings that you have. Can we reduce it? Does the frequency in the meetings need to decrease? It might need to increase. Do they need to be 60 minutes or can they be 30? Can they be 15? Can this be a report? Can this be done in a Slack conversation? Can this be done in a project management tool? Do we need to have a scheduled touch point for specific approvals so that we're not waiting and sending conversations back and forth, trying to decipher what they mean in an email? There's a variety of ways that will be relevant for you based on whether you're a marketing agency or whatever type of creative firm. But we have to look at why are projects not moving through on time, because that is eating into your profit. That time could be spent on sales and marketing activity to get the next client and or serving that additional client versus pouring all of it back into existing clients that is really just eating into your margins. So profit killer number one is scope creep, scope seep. Profit killer number two is not moving projects through the timeline. We got one more coming, but don't forget, I'm going to go a little bit deeper on the solutions to each one of these. I know we've touched on it a little bit, but I'm going to go a little bit deeper on more tactical things you could be doing to solve each one of these. Now, the profit killer number three is what I like to call is the, hey, is that done? Or where are we at with? Because the number of clients we've worked with where the back and forth communication in Slack messages or emails or text or phone calls that is between team members and even between approval from your team and the client eats into your margins like no other. And again, when you don't have those clear deliverables that we talked about in the beginning, you often just take this as, oh, well, this is just how work is done, but it's not. You can have a better handoff between different stages of work, between different team members. There's probably specific milestones and things that the client is going to need to sign off on in order to move projects forward. So identifying where are all of the moments where your team is like, hey, is that that done? Can I take it from you yet? Or the client saying, hey, where are we at with this thing in this project, are signs that you are missing out on profit inside of your business. Imagine if every single person on your team is now working an additional 5 hours a week. When you add up all of the back and forth administrative, where is this? Are we done with that? What stage are we in? Is that done yet? Is it ready for me? Have you looked at this thing yet? If that just added an additional hour per team member, and say you had 5 team members, that's 5 hours. So if you're spending $100 an hour per person, may say that was your cost, you've just increased that to 500, right? On every single client. For some of you, it's probably way more than just an additional hour lost per team member. Your cost could be way higher that you're not even accounting for inside of delivery because of this inefficient communication. So in the comments below, I want to know which of these 3 has likely been eating into your profits that you're going to look into next. Profit killer number 1, scope creep and scope seep. Profit killer number 2, which is not having projects move through on timeline. Profit killer number 3, which is the, hey, where is that? Is that done? Where are we at with? Profit killer 1, 2, or 3, drop it in the comments below. Now, the solution to profit killer number 1, which is scope creep and scope seep, is to get your scope under control, right? If you're billing at 150, but in reality, you're actually only making 120 because of the things that we've talked about, your team probably feels maxed out. And so looking at utilization, like how much time and bandwidth is each person spending on the client? We want to first look at the offer and the service itself. What are we promising to give to the client? And what are we promising to actually get done? Is it clear? For example, I see a common issue with service providers where they, inside of their price, say we incorporate strategic advice, which is extremely vague if you ask me. And you have your client who's sitting on the other side saying, I'm thinking about this random thing. In my mind, it's sort of in alignment with this. Let me go ask them. And they come to you and they, whether it's an email or a phone call, hey, I was thinking about doing this. And they just, in their mind, are chalking it up to strategic advice. How do you fix that? Well, you can say, hey, we provide strategy and we do that by offering up 3 strategic advisory calls that you can use at any point. Right? So now we're saying, hey, if you want strategic advice, we're going to have these 3 calls that we can jam on to discuss strategy. One really great way to check if the deliverable or the promise is clear enough is, can you actually sit there and say, when I read this, am I able to check mark as if it were done? So can you read it and say, check, we've done that? If you can't say, check, we've delivered strategic advice, or you can check it, but they might not check it, it's probably not clear enough. Now, how do we fix profit killer number 2, which again is getting projects through on timeline? Well, you start by managing it. The first way to manage it is to actually have a project management tool set up, whether that's ClickUp, Asana, Notion, Monday, whatever you use, it doesn't really matter. But you and your team need to be fully trained on how to use it, how to communicate. Is there any sort of dwell time between tasks? Like, get really clear on how does your team get notified if something should be moving forward faster. Having a project manager managing that tool or an admin overseeing that tool and or client relationship could also be a really advantageous hire if you don't have that person inside of your business. Now, you might be saying, but Greg, what if we can't actually see the scope? This is why with our clients in our training and coaching programs, we help them break out their core offer into phases and steps, arguably which could be delivered in a sprint or a specific window of time that you know that, hey, this phase of work usually takes us this time. You got to ask yourself, like, what gets done in this phase 1, phase 2, and what are the objectives and the containers for each of these phases and or each of these sprints? So for our clients, they design a core offer. Typically, it ends up being 3 stages or phases that take up 9 steps total. So 3 steps in each of the phases for a total of 9 steps and 3 phases. Now, inside of each one of those steps, there's clear criteria. They know when that step is complete so that they can move on to the next step with the client. So this is where you see phases, stages, sprints as really advantageous, which could then align back to your project management tool, ClickUp, Monday, Notion, whatever. Another common issue that comes with projects not getting done on time is that the team members executing the work aren't fully clear enough on what was actually sold, what the timeline was that was promised, and or the actual deliverables. And so if your team actually has client-facing relations, and multiple of them do, I see this happen a lot where the client will ask the current member of your team a question and they're not sure if it's included or not, and they don't want to disappoint the client, they don't want to disappoint or bother you, so they just go ahead and do it. But it's actually not part of the deliverables, and now it's wasting their time. And they're probably, again, not communicating it back to you because they feel like they should just help the client. But because it wasn't clear in the first place, that's what's allowing that to happen. So if you have clients interfacing with multiple team members through the course of a project, you might want to go back and make sure that every single person is clear as to what is inbounds for the deliverable and what the timeline for their stage of work should be that they should be focused on meeting. Now, profit killer number 3, which again is the where is that? How does this get done? I feel like the solution is really just better onboarding. Having an internal kickoff call or an internal handoff from sales team to your delivery team with an agenda of like, hey, here's what's happening. This is the client, so that the team knows like what's up and what's going on. This is what this project is going to look like. We got to get team buy-in. And again, this could be on a kickoff call with the client in some cases, but more so likely you meeting with your team inside of the onboarding stage of work and asking them for their feedback, sharing a standard and your standard expectation, which might require training. If they didn't do something, you got to tell them. I see a lot of mismanagement and really abdication happening because you want to remove yourself from delivery, but you never set the standard. You didn't get them bought in, and they don't want to do anyone wrong and lose their job or disappoint a client. So they're saying yes to things just because they feel like they have to, because there was no standard or expectations set. You can say like, look, I don't need an email about this, or these are things I do need emails about. This is what I want to be in the know about. This is what you're good to move forward with or without my say. Because at the end of the day, you, the founder, endorse whatever it is you tolerate. So if your team is saying yes to deliverables outside of scope, well, you've been allowing that to happen and you need to fix it. And onboarding and having an internal handoff, some guidelines with your team, and really just training them and letting them know, telling them, which it could be like, I say training them, and I don't want that to sound so overwhelming. Like sit down and with all of your team and take them through 60 minutes. Look, this is our process. This is what we're doing for clients. This is what I expect of you. This is what is inbounds and out of bounds. You can literally just set the standard meeting with your team, have it documented as a reminder. Some of them probably don't even know right now, and that's why it's happening. So how do we solve that? Is we let them know. There you have it, the 3 profit killers and the 3 solutions that you can put in place starting today to make sure that you're more profitable and that you can serve more clients with less effort. If you want help with this is exactly what we help our clients do. You can schedule a call with myself and or the team in the description below. That being said, you're probably thinking about, well, how can I start to systematize some of these things? So go check out this video.